Mm. All right, we're on holding by the Book of Leviticus chapter 18. Again, we're going to walk on. Holding by Book of Leviticus chapter 18. Been a couple weeks. But it's good to be back. Again, we're going to walk on. Holding by Book of Leviticus chapter 18. And we are in verse 4. And the Torah says, Es mishpatai tasu es hukosai tishmaru alechet behem ani Hashem Elokeichem. So here the Torah says that you shall do my judgments, keep my ordinances, right? Things that don't make sense logically, to walk in them. I am the eternal your God, right? So Rashi over here says that things that's talking about human feeling of justice over here, just as one feels that it should be this way, even though it doesn't have to be spoken about. Meaning, sometimes there are things that are obvious in the Torah. The Torah mentions it. Torah mentions it anyway, and we spoke about that. And keeping my ordinances, matters with decrees of the king, right? Where the inclination is going to raise objections and say, why should we observe them? They don't make any sense. And against the nations of the world, they're also going to raise objections. Not that we care, but they'll say, come on, why can't we pig? Why can't we wear clothing, mixture woven linen? What about the ashes of the red heifer? How does the red heifer work? Right? And all that. So therefore it says, I am the Lord your God. Right? In other words, you have an obligation to keep them regardless. And then it said you have to walk in them, meaning that you can't free yourself from their environment, i.e., you shouldn't say, well, I got wisdom, and I'm going to acquire wisdom of other nations, right, so to speak, and walk in their ways, right? So you're never free from learning Torah. So we spoke about that as well. So we're sort of in the middle of this kliyakar, so just sort of recapitulate a little bit over here. The kliyakar asked the question, and we got into this whole thing about a few weeks back, right? We spoke about this idea of Olam Haba, about the next world, about this world, etc. So the question he asks is that seemingly, why do we bring forth the word mishpatim right before the word chukim? Mishpatim again are laws that are logical. That would make sense, even though a lot of the laws in Torah don't make sense, but that's okay, right? Nonetheless, here it says mishpatim before chukim, right? It says mishpatim, laws I understand come before laws I don't understand. Then afterwards, right, the next verse is going to say the opposite. It's going to say the opposite order, right? We'll see in verse 5, I know we're going to get there, but it says in verse 5, guard the laws that don't make sense and the laws that do make sense. Why, says the Kli Yakar, are they juxtaposed? In other words, why in this verse it says laws I do understand before laws I don't understand, and why in the next verse it says the opposite? It says laws I don't understand before laws I do understand. Because in the first verse, in our verse, what's talking about the rewards, reward in this world, right? To go in their ways, right? The Torah here says, tishmaru, right? You keep the laws, even the laws don't make sense, to walk in their ways. What's it talking about? Walking in their ways. That you get rewards. you get reward in this world. We said the problem. The Gemara says, Sar mitzvah b'chai almaleka. You don't get reward for the mitzvahs that you do, right, in this world. So how can it be you get reward? So the Ramchal in Derech Hashem says that a person gets some of the reward. Let's say for the mitzvah that a person does, if he does it with great joy. The Arizal provides glory of blessed memory, right? The great commentator on Kabbalah, on the Zohar, says many things he merited to know and to understand was because of the great joy that he kept Torah mitzvahs. Yeah. So it could be that if a person does mitzvahs with great joy, very good. Yeah, then you get reward. You get some of the reward, right, in this world. Now, for evil people that will not have a portion of the world to come, they'll get reward for what they've done if they did a few mitzvahs in this world. They'll get rewards for the mitzvah in this world. Why? Because God has to reward. He can't go against what he brought down to this world. So therefore, a person, if they're so evil, which is probably not too many people today, that they would get reward for whatever mitzvah they done. Maybe they gave charity once in their life. Maybe they helped Granny cross the street. I don't know. They did something to get reward in this world. Very good. But they don't get anything in the next world. Okay. So again, even if someone is going to have a portion of the world to come, it could be some part of the mitzvah they may get in this world. Very good. Right? So says the Kli Yakar over here, this is what it means that a person, goes from level to level. A person is not stagnant. Right? If a person is stagnant, we mentioned this many times. We're going to throw this out there again. If a person is stagnant, they're happy. They're happy being mediocre. That is akin to spiritual death. Right? A person is considered what the commentaries and what the Gemara says is a person is considered a Adam Mahalech or Adam Holech. I mean, the person goes. Person moves. They're not static. They don't stay in the same place. And he brings a proof from Prophet Zechariah, from Zechariah, chapter 3, verse 4. He says, I gave to you, you're walking on the way, Bein oimdim ha'eleh. Right? What does it mean? Among the ones that are standing. Who are the ones that are considered standing? Comes along Kli Yakar, and he says, according to Zechariah, the ones that are standing are angels. Angels stand. Angels they do move about, but essentially they don't go from level to level. In other words, there are angels that are higher level. There are angels that are, let's say, lower level. Okay, but essentially they're standing. They don't go from level to level. A person is considered, as we said before, he goes from level to level. He could go up, could go down. But a person is called Adam Mahalech, a person that goes. Literally a person that walks. An angel doesn't walk. An angel stands in place. Yeah? Because he says, the Kli Yakar, it's only at one level. An angel, no matter what happens, whatever level it got to, whatever level it's at, guess what? That's it. That's where it stays. That's where it stays. But a person is called a Adam Mahalech. Person is considered someone who goes, someone who walks. So says Kli Yakar further, also Haba, the next world. Also, a person is considered sitting. What does it mean a person is considered sitting? Because Gemara says, Sadikim Yoshvim, Beatro Sehem Beroishim, that righteous people sit with crowns on their head, right? Sitting, they're not walking per se. They're sitting with a crown on their head. And sitting, what is sitting a reference to over here? Sitting, you can say, wow, isn't that like an angel? Right? An angel's omate. An angel stands. Very good. So here you're sitting. So the righteous person is sitting. He's not walking. right? It's considered like he's standing. Yeah. Now, why would that be? In other words, if a person potentially in this world, well, we're not talking about the next world for a second, right? In this world, it's called an Adam right? Adam Mahale. Person walks. Very good. What about the next world? Ain't really walking too much. You're sitting there. You're whatever. For a righteous person, he's sitting there with a crown on his head. Very good. Yeah, so you say, okay, so that's the next world, right? That's the next world. But over there, in the next world, he's considered like someone who stands. Like an angel, it's stand. Now, seemingly it's contradiction. Either you tell me he's an Adam Mahalach, and he's walking and he's going, right? Or he's not. Or he's standing like an angel. What is it? So you tell me it depends. In this world, a person can go up and down. Person goes up and down different levels. Person can go up a level, up 3 levels, down 2 levels, down more levels, up more levels, whatever it is. We're constantly moving. Right? If a person says, well, I'm happy being mediocre, and that's it, and I'm happy being, as I would say, humdrum, very good. So you're not moving. You're dead. That's spiritually being dead. I've heard, I mentioned this before. I've heard somebody say, I shouldn't say many people, I heard somebody say, I'm good, happy where I am. That is akin to spiritual death. We should never be happy where we are. It doesn't mean we throw ourselves under the bus. But what does that mean? Right? It means we always have room to grow. Right? We always have room to grow. So, a person saying, wow, I'm good, I'm happy, being mediocre, no good. No good. Now, why? So if that's in this world, the soul goes up and down, the person goes up and down. Very good. What about the spiritual world? So if a righteous person gets a very high level, very high, a big portion of the world to come, very good. He's at a much higher level. Okay. Why is it considered like he's standing or like he's sitting over here with the crown on his head? Because he already acquired, says Kliyakar, he already acquired his, he already reached his potential. So since he reaches potential and more, what does he need to do? I mean, obviously, he's got what to learn in the next world. I don't think there's any question because, spirituality is infinite, so to speak. So it's going to learn from God himself. So multiple levels over here. Very good. Right? Very good. But he already acquired it. He already acquired a portion of the world to come. He already fixed up whatever he needed to fix up. He reached a great portion of the world to come. Very good. Yeah. Now, he says further, the reward in this world, the reward in this world comes from laws that we do that make sense. Now, even laws that don't make sense, obviously, we should get merit for as well. But he's saying over here, at the beginning of the verse, it says, it's mishpatai tasu, v'yashu kosai tishmaru. Right? It says the laws I understand, very good. Right? The laws I understand you're going to do. Even the laws you don't understand, you're gonna guard against. Very good. So he says reward in this world. What's talking about? It's talking about the fact that you're keeping the laws that you do understand, right? That makes sense, right? So to speak. And even you're staying away from things, guarding yourself against things that even if they don't make sense, right? Against those laws that don't make sense. Or as he says over here, the reason is not revealed, right? We can try and figure out the reason, but essentially, many things in the Torah do not make rational sense. So he says those reasons are not revealed. Very good. So what's it coming to teach you? What's it coming to teach you over here? So he says it's coming to teach you that not just the reward of the laws, for the laws you keep, that makes sense. You're going to get reward and you're going to go in front of God, so to speak, and get all this reward, and it's going to be a benefit. Yeah, not only that, but rather what? Even if I keep the laws that don't make sense, right? Even if the laws themselves, to our own puny understanding, we don't understand them. We don't understand what the benefit is. We're going to keep it because it's a divine decree anyway. So it doesn't really matter either way. We're gonna keep it whether it makes sense or not. Yeah, so he says, clause that makes sense, very good. It's considered like you're walking, you're walking in them. Why? Makes sense, right? These laws make sense. Oh, what about the other laws? What about the other laws don't make sense? So even he says, keeping the laws, even though the reason is not revealed, i.e., it doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense to us. Nonetheless, you get rewards because you walk in front of God, right? In other words, if you tell me a person kept the things that made sense, right, that'll have a tremendous amount more meaning. Why? It makes sense. Why I should do this? Why I should do that? Or stay away from this or whatever, right? Those things, even though, most of the Torah doesn't make logical sense, doesn't matter. But for those things that make sense, what would I say? Good. So you get rewarded because you're keeping it because it makes sense, right? And it would make sense, that, if God's going to reveal himself and give the Torah, there should be things that make sense. And a person's going to keep, very good. So that means you're walking with God. You're going in the right path. Again, when you're doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing, okay, there's payback, as we always say. Yeah, but there's a difference. There's going to be a difference if you're keeping mitzvahs that don't make sense. Yeah, the ones that don't make sense, why are you going to keep them? What's the obvious reason you're going to keep them? You're going to keep them because 100% is a divine decree. It is a divine decree, right? So that's seemingly, you have to guard yourself against these things. Because the evil inclination, as Rashi said, right? The nations, secular Jews will probably say the same thing. Why are you going to keep this? Doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Should only keep that that which is logical. Yeah, so then you're going to ask them, okay, it says, do this. Or, for a guy, it says put on tefillin, so why don't you put on tefillin? You're going to say it's illogical. Put it on these boxes, okay. Don't steal. Let's say don't steal. Well, that's logical. So you got quarters for Uncle Sam, right? You hide money, whatever. No, that's different. He takes too much anyway, but that's logical. He said no one's getting hurt by it. I don't know, more money in the government coffers, whatever government's going to use it for. They have a right to that money, right? You earn that money, very good, so you should pay. Right, 100% you should pay. Now again, people will, do all kinds of things to get out of paying taxes or paying more taxes. So if it's legal, if it's legal, it's legal. But I remember when I took a mentorship course in real estate and finding, undervalued properties and this and that. So this guy, they're not Jewish, I don't know, so religious or not. But one of the things he said is that any market, he had a certain way of doing things. He said any market you should be able to make money. All things being equal, you should be able to make money, right? You should be able to make money, and what? You should be able to make money and make plenty of money. So he said, therefore, you don't pull any shtick. He didn't use that language, but he said, first of all, you don't want to get caught doing anything. And it's not worth it, you pay it. Right? 100% you pay it. The law of the land is you got to pay taxes. You got to pay taxes. Yeah. Again, does it have to be that high? Yeah, that's the whole question. Right? That's the whole question. So again, what do people do? People try and hide money. Right? They're and here certainly, in Israel, because the tax bracket's very high. So they're always coming different countries auditing them because they know they're hiding money. Right? Everyone knows they're hiding money. They're trying to hide money because the tax bracket's high. Yeah, the tax bracket's very high. Yeah, in either case, that's theft. Sure. Right? That is stealing from Uncle Sam. What do you think Uncle Sam has the right to take it or not? It's called Dina de Machusa Dina. Dina Malchus Dina means law of the land. That is the law of the land. Yeah, you're making money. You can say, well, it's illogical. Why should government have to say? Yeah. Well, why should you have to pay taxes? Good. Again, it's the law of the land. Whether you should, whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense, the government, should get a piece of it or not. Okay, that's debatable. But it doesn't matter. It's on the books. The law is on the books. It doesn't give you a right to, it does not give you a right, to steal. That's stealing. That's stealing according to the Torah because there's a huge mitzvah to keep what the law of the land says. Now, the only question is, what if the law of the land, I don't want to, dwell on this too much, but what if the law of the land directly goes against what the Torah says? Well, that's a different issue, right? Back in the day, the former Soviet Union, it was illegal, right, for Jews to do circumcision. Yeah, so there were people that were Moser Nefesh, that did tremendous amount of self-sacrifice, right, to do it. They had to do it on the right day. And they knew the KGB, or as they would say here, the KGB, right, they're all, they're informers all over the place. So they know who's who, whatever. They're risking their lives, right, risking their lives. But guess what? That's what you have to do, right? In other words, the government's going to try and stop you. You have to do it anyway, right? So you're going to be, okay, so you don't want to get caught. You don't want to be thrown in jail, this and that. Okay, you're not going to defy them openly. You do that, you'll end up in Siberia, who knows where, right? But again, even if that's the law of the land, that would be the law of the land. It goes directly against the Torah. That's a problem, right? That is for sure a problem, right? So you got to keep what the Torah says, right? Regardless of what the law of the land, is. And you see, from the Torah itself, there are taxes, other things. So you see that it's not a foreign idea, right? Not a totally foreign idea, but they went to specific things, right? They took a half shekel from people, right, every year for the sake of the sacrifices and upkeep of the temple, right? Now, a person could say, well, where our money's going, they could be used for all kinds of things. That's also a problem. People would say here, it's good to lie, to the government, or be even permissible because of where let's say, municipal taxes go, right? And what it's used for, right? So a person could argue, well, if they're giving it to bad things, right, it's a terrible thing. So I have a right. I have a right to lie, right? I have a right to lie. And the reason is because that money's going to, X, Y, or Z that goes against Torah. Okay. Well, let's say, so there's a whole question whether the law of the land applies in Israel or not. Yeah, very, very big disagreement of opinion. Whether the law of the land, whether there's such a thing as law of the land of Israel, especially if the government itself are not religious, right? And they don't, and they go against the Torah. Some people say it's a mitzvah to steal against this country, right? Mitzvah not to declare, because of this. Well, let's say a person's going to be, uphold the law. They're going to keep what it says. Very good. Now, what if that money goes to things, build soccer stadiums, gymnasiums, who knows what, right? That's going to be used for things that, for a religious person, they wouldn't give to, right? They for sure wouldn't give to. So they're giving, right? Let's say better. They're taking your money and they're using it for things that, let's say, go against Torah. Yeah. Is that your issue? You're not doing that. You have to pay the taxes, right? For better or for worse. Even if you hide money, whatever, you got to pay something. You're for sure going to have to pay something. Okay. Now, even if you have to pay something, and that money goes to things you don't want to be part of. Yeah. So some people say you don't pay. Yeah. So you pay as little as possible, right? You basically lie. Yeah. You basically lie. Okay. Now, let's say, even if you pay less, that money is still going, whether it's a lot or whether it's a little, it doesn't matter. It's still going to the same place, right? It's not going to any different place. You're very good. Is that a person's transgression? If they pay taxes, the money's going to something goes against Torah, right? Is that forbidden? And so you could say, simple answer is no. You're not telling them where to give it. You have to pay it for whatever reason. Right? You got to pay it wherever they give it, they give it. Okay. Now, again, you're not going to get away paying nothing, per se. right? Whatever goes. So is that your transgression? Is that direct? Is that considered like you're giving this money is going directly, to build a soccer stadium? It's going directly to build, I don't know, a discotheque or who knows what, right? Whatever garbage they give it to, building more, I don't know, planting more trees, I don't know, wherever it goes. Wherever it goes against Torah. Probably planting trees, probably not forbidden, even though Arabs will probably burn them down, but it doesn't really matter. Wherever it goes, is that your transgression? No. Why is it not your transgression? Because not direct. It's not direct. But not only that, you don't have a say. You have no say, so you're under onus anyway. Right? It's beyond your capability over here. You can't do anything about it. You can't say, okay, I'm going to pay X amount of taxes, let's say. Very good, you're going to pay it, but I'm going to decide where it goes. Right? Wouldn't that be great? Whoever person lives, they have to pay taxes. They decide where it goes. Yeah, well, that ain't going to happen. Right? In most places, probably all places, you don't have a say. You don't have a say where it goes. But you can say it's corrupt and they're using it for this and using it for that. Okay. You can say the whole system's corrupt. Okay. Yeah, so what are you going to do? So if you have, let's say, somebody that, had an all cash business. They had an all cash business. Now, what happens when you have an all cash business? An all cash business means you can declare whatever you want. That's what it means, right? In other words, I don't have anything fixed, right? I have nothing fixed. All it means is that, the government is never going to know how much came in. They're never going to know how much came in. So what do? What can a person do if they did, if they run an all cash business? They write receipts for what they want, and they'll clear what they want. I know what happens if they're making a lot of money. Right? Now, if they make a lot of money, well, they're not declaring it. Right? So let's say they're not declaring it. What do? What do? They buy properties. They buy, I don't know, maybe even they have fancy cars or properties or whatever. If it's in their name, and let's say they declare they're making $50,000 a year. Yeah? That's what they're making. Okay. But now they have 2 houses, fancy cars, whatever. The government be all over them. How can that be? How can it be making this amount of money and you have this? Yeah, right. And you have these assets, right? Let's say. So if the assets aren't your name, that's very easy. Say it's not mine. I don't own it. It's a lie. It's a total lie, but you don't own it, right? Really, you don't own it. Yeah, other people buy second homes and this and that. They run out of the people's names, so they don't get hit. With such a tax hike, on it. Because in certain places, if you buy more than one property, you can get hit. You get hit pretty high with taxes. Okay, right? Now, back to the original question. So even if you have to pay, right? Even if you have to pay here, a person can declare what they want. They can absolutely declare what they want. Now, according to Torah, you're allowed to do that. Would you be allowed to do that? What's the answer? Again, no matter whether you think it's illegal or not. It's the law of the land. Yeah, this is the law of the land. You got to pay taxes. Okay. Now, if that's true, I could declare, or not me, somebody could declare either a lot or a little. They get to declare what they want because no one is going to be able to find out otherwise. There are no receipts. There's nothing. It's all cash. Right? It's all cash. So whatever they file, yeah, they are declaring what they want to declare. They're not necessarily declaring what they're obligated to declare. Again, why? They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to pay as much as tax. Now, obviously, they're going to clear a certain amount. Right? They don't want it to look totally like fraud. Major red flags and all that. So, if they own other property, it won't be in their name. Yeah, so they will get nailed that way. And they'll pay less taxes. Okay. Yeah, according to the Torah. According to the Torah, are you allowed to do that? Right? So my Rebbe would say very clear. What does the Torah say? The Torah says, the bar sheker tirchak. You're not allowed to lie. That's lying. That's lying. Right? He would say even like back in the day, here, people would bring in electronics, not to sell, When they would bring it in to sell, that would be illegal, right? That would be illegal according to the law. Why do they bring it in? Because it's cheaper, because taxes were up the gazoo on electronic products, right? So today's not the case, except for cars. The resale value on cars here is absolutely through the roof, right? You can buy a secondhand car, that is, say 5 years old, 7 years old, right? Where in the States and other places it costs you a few $1,000, maybe a little bit more. Here it's going to cost you the price of a new car. That's insane. It's absolutely insane because they charge a huge amount of taxes. One of the newer cars this came out a few years ago. A few years ago, they started selling here as a Toyota Sienna. I don't know if it's a Toyota Sienna. It's like a passenger car, a passenger van. Right? A lot of religious families in the States definitely have these type of vans, or they had what do they call it, Honda Odyssey. I don't see too many of them, but you see vans. You see Toyota Siennas now. Again, when someone owns it or they lease it, whatever. To buy it is like you might as well put a down payment for a mortgage, right? It's insane, right? The price is like almost $100,000, right? Or it's about $70,000, $80,000, right? For a $35,000 car, maybe $40,000 car, if that, probably less than the state. But the taxes are up the gazoo, absolutely up the gazoo. Now the problem is if a person, let's say, they wanted to make they wanted to come, so there's certain benefits you get for coming here, right? And one of them is you can buy a car tax free, right? You can buy well with a lot less tax, let's say. Or what some people will do is, which is kind of dicey, and that is, what will they do? They'll import. They'll export. They'll have their car in the States and they'll export it to here. Now you could do that. Problem is, what type of model is it? And they have all the parts there. They don't have the parts there, that doesn't make sense to do it. Right? It certainly wouldn't make sense, to do it. But anyway, the point is that there are, if a person would bring in, a camera, a computer, I don't know, something that the tax is going to be absurd, right? The tax would be absolutely absurd on it back in the day, talking many years ago, right? Many years ago. So bringing it in, is that an issue? Now, when you come to Israel, there are two lines you go through, right? Potentially you go through. One, you have things to declare, right? You have whatever it is you want to declare to customs. Then you might have to pay for it or not. And the other line is where they're not going to check, right? In other words, in general, it's a place we have nothing to declare. Now, randomly, custom officials, even if you're going in the line where you're not declaring anything, they can check a person randomly. Yeah. Now, if you had, let's say you bought a camera. Now, obviously, you take it out of the package. It's not brand new. You pass it off that way, whatever. Yeah, but let's say it was brand new clothing you had in there with the tags on. Or you had like a new camera, or something electronic, where taxes would be probably 100% on the item itself. So now the question is, are you allowed to do it? Are you allowed to do it? So that gets in the whole question of this idea whether you say the land of Israel has the status of Dina Malchus Dina, the law of the land. If it doesn't have the status of the law of the land, so then it shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, if it does have the status of the law of the land, then a person will say, and it comes down to a few different factors. One factor is, what's the chance a person's going to get caught? Yeah, they can check a person randomly, totally randomly. Yeah, well, let's say there's a good enough chance you won't get caught. Yeah, it's Murphy's Law, right? We'll blame it on Mr. Murphy here. Right, the Murphy's Law. Let's say they check you, you get caught. Yeah, so some rabbinic authorities would say, if you know 100% you're not going to get caught, which you can't say that, but if you know 100%, then it'll be permissible. Other rabbinic, but what happens if you get caught, though? See, this is the problem. If you look like an Orthodox Jew, right? If you look like an Orthodox Jew and you get caught, that's a huge kalasha. Very big desecration of God's name. Secular people do it all the time, right? Let's say, yeah, they're not going to get slapped upside the head like an Orthodox Jew would, because they say, if you want a big headline, it's going to sell newspapers if people still read them today. Yeah, and you say, dog bites man, big letters. Okay, no one's going to read it. If you say man bites dog, that's a story, right? So you got an Orthodox Jew that gets caught bringing things in. Yeah, I don't tell you again. We're not saying to sell it. It's not a problem. It's technically it should be a problem to bring it in, right? But they'll say you got to pay tax on it. Yeah, you're not bringing 50 cameras to sell. That's illegal. That for sure is forbidden. Yeah, that for sure is forbidden. The issue is if you get caught, right? If you get caught. So some say 100% permissible to do. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's not desecration of God's name. You have a right to do it because they charge too much, this and that. Or that, we don't hold to the law of the land. Right? Other rabbinic authorities say it's totally forbidden. Totally forbidden. Yeah, you're not allowed to do it. So there's a middle position. The middle position is if you're confident and you're not going to get caught. But you really can't say that. But let's say the middle position. If you don't get caught, not a problem. If you get caught, it's probably gonna be a desecration of God's name. Yeah, in general. Now, why do I bring all that up? Because someone asked my Rebbe this question: are you allowed to do it? Right? Or I think I even asked the question. I think I asked him the question. Are you allowed to do it? If you don't hold to the law of the land, if you don't hold to the law of the land, and you're not going to get caught, right? There's a good enough chance you won't get caught. Are you allowed to do it? So this is what he said. He said, you're forgetting there's a verse in the Torah. You're forgetting there's a verse in the Torah. Which verse is that? It's Var Sheker Tirchak. You're lying. Now again, other people would disagree, and they say that's not a lie because we don't hold the law of the land. Okay, so in that sense, it's not a lie. Yeah, but even so, this is between you and God. Yeah, between you and God. Forget about all the other factors. Forget about everything else. What is this called? It's a lie. Bottom line, it's a lie. Yeah. So he said people forget whether it's permissible, it's not permissible. Is it a lie or it's not a lie? It's a lie. Essentially, it's a lie. If you get caught, it's worse. If you get caught, it's worse. Yeah. It's and people take that chance because they don't care. They don't care, and if they say something, let's say they make you pay. Let's say they fine you, they make you pay. Yeah, you'll still say maybe it's still cheaper than if you would have bought it there. Okay. But essentially they'll claim, whether it's right or wrong, they'll claim it's smuggling. It's like you're smuggling it. So I do understand if it would be something that you brought in 50 packages of it. You hid it in different places. Or different people brought in, let's say, you had a family of 5 or 6 and you each get 2 bags. I don't think you get 2 bags today, but let's say, so you have an extra bag. Each person has, 2 bags. So you put it all, you hide it in different things. Very good. So you could take in a lot of stuff. You could potentially take in a lot of things. That is illegal. That 100% according to the law with the holder of it not, that's illegal. That's smuggling. That's smuggling things in to make a profit that you're not allowed to. That's forbidden. Yeah. But if it's for your own usage, you're not going to sell it. No intention to sell it. Yeah, right? Why'd you buy it? Because it's cheaper. Right? It's 10 times cheaper than it would be here. Okay. There are people who did that. 100%. They would bring things in because it was cheaper. Yeah, no question. So that should be okay. Right? In theory, but it's against the law. It's against the law to do that. Really, you should declare it. Now, how many people do it? Today, it's a whole different thing because, the prices on electronic things have come way down. Certainly, it's still, more expensive in other places. You want to buy a nice set of headphones here, right? You can buy, cheaper on AliExpress, let's say, get them sent here. Get them sent in for a third of the price, right? So some people do that. Other people, if they don't want to wait, 2, 3 weeks or whatever, okay. Yeah, but prices come way down on that. On a car, no. Right? Even an old car, doesn't matter. Even an old car, it's crazy the taxes. Okay. But guess what? You want to buy it, you gotta pay it. There is no way around that. Right? Whatever someone's gonna sell it for, you pay it. Why? Because secondhand cars, they go for a lot. Anyway, the point is that a person's gonna get upstairs after 120 years. After they die. Right? One of the things, there are two things you're going to be asked. The question, which order? Whether you learn Torah and we're honest in business. Right? The big discrepancy, what you're asked first. Doesn't really matter. Yeah? But being honest in business. Yeah? In this case, were you honest? So you say it depends. It depends. Don't hold to the law of the land. So again, you're going to handle with God over it. You're going to argue. Well, if you don't hold to the law of the land, I didn't do anything wrong. Right? Technically, I didn't do anything wrong. True. Yeah. And let's say you didn't get caught. Let's say you didn't get caught. Okay. You didn't get caught. Very good. Did you do the right thing or not? Can a person say in this case, regardless of whether your whole day should be taxed or not, did you do the right thing or not? You come out squeaky clean. What's the answer? No. But again, people will say, I've heard a lot of people say this, it's an absolute mitzvah to defraud the government, to defraud the tax authorities. Yeah, there are people that hold that because of what they use the money for and what they do against religious people. There are plenty of people that hold that. But I will say, even if you hold it, I can hear, these words, my Rebbe ringing in my ears. Yeah, you better not get caught. Yeah, you better not get caught because the Torah says you're not allowed to lie. Regardless of what you think the government is. Regardless of whether you think they're stealing money and taxes are too high. Everyone agrees taxes are too high. No question about it. Why do you think tax authority goes, and goes to different companies, this and that, audits them? Not because they see anything necessarily wrong. They know people are hiding money. They know that. Right? So they're going to go in with a fine-tooth comb, make sure. They're going to try and get as much as they can. Okay. Right? But if you're going to say, right, and this is the point, if you're going to say, I don't care. There's an absolute mitzvah ase daraisa. There's a Torah command to rip off the government in Israel. Yeah, let's say a person's going to hold that. Okay, yeah, there is such a position. Now, if that's such a position, you better darn well not get caught, because if you get caught and you're an Orthodox Jew, it looks 10 times worse. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. It's irrelevant. The rest of the company is ripping the government off and they didn't get caught. Okay. Yeah. They get caught in other things, I'm sure. Doesn't really matter. Right? But in this case, they don't get caught. Very good. So they didn't get caught. So they won this one. Okay. Yeah. So the government will nail them also. But if they nail an Orthodox Jew, it looks worse. 10 times worse. Right? So even if a person's going to say, even if they're going to say, I have a right 100% to rip off the government, if you get caught, then it's 10 times worse. Right? 10 times worse. At the end of the day, there's plenty of fraud, unfortunately, that exists. Especially in the Orthodox community. Yeah, it exists. Right? It's definitely out there. Why do I have to be squeaky clean? Other people making money, they're cutting corners, this and that. Right? So why should I cut corners also? All right, let's say it's against the law. There's fraud, there's other things. Yeah, that's worse. Certain industries versus an Orthodox Jew, people look down on you. Why? Because there's been a lot of fraud, right, in different things. That makes everybody look bad. All you need is one person. Yeah, I mentioned the story before because a friend of mine was there when somebody asked the Torah giant of the last generation, right, of blessed memory. They asked him the question. At least he's asking the question, right? He's asking the question like this: I have certain material. I have grade A, grade B, grade C. So the so-called Orthodox Jew says, I want to sell it as grade A. So the rabbi looks at him and says, I don't understand the question. Right? Obviously, it's stealing. That's misrepresentation. Right? You don't know how to do that. It's fraud. So he started explaining again, but he started like saying it much louder. Like he thought he was deaf. He didn't hear him. So he stopped him in the middle. It's like, I understood the question. I'm not deaf. I understood the question. He said, that's stealing. 100% it's stealing. It's fraud. So why do you think it's permissible? Yeah, why would you think it's permissible? So the answer was, Rebbe, it's business. This is what people do. Okay. If that's what people do, who says you're allowed to do it? Who says you're allowed to commit fraud? Even by non-Jews. Right? Who says you're allowed to steal from non-Jews? Not allowed to. Right? All the more so you're not allowed to steal from a Jew. Right? Gives us a really bad name. A relatively bad name. Yeah, so we want to be squeaky clean as much as possible. Right? As much as possible. Regardless, again, keep in mind, Rav Cheskel Everson says this a lot in his books, Or Yecheskel, right? It's not never been translated into English. He was the spiritual mentor of the Mir Yeshiva and in Panovich here in Bnei Brak, and many times he writes that people do things for the sake of frumkeit. Frumkeit means because of religiosity, for religious reasons, so to speak. Yeah, but they only look that way on the outside, right? They only look that way on the outside, but on the inside, they're doing other things, right? Now, if someone is doing something, and they look like an Orthodox Jew, again, look like. I'm going to say look like in quotation marks, because they look like an Orthodox Jew, but, I'm not saying they're impersonating. I mean, they are in a certain way, right? But what if they're doing things that are illegal? They're illegal. Yeah, there's someone got caught many years ago. I got in trouble for this. Someone got caught. Money laundering. Right? Money laundering. Now, why were they involved in money laundering? No taxation. They want to pay taxes on the money. Yeah, I give 100 reasons why. That's probably the main reason. So, whatever. When I was involved in this blog many years ago, and I made a statement. This person got caught. Probably ended up doing jail time. I forget exactly what happened. But I made one comment. And this comment, I always got to be careful what you say, but I was very clear. My comment was, this person felt bad because they obviously got caught, right? It was definitely a desecration of God's name, right? He felt bad and he admitted he was wrong. He admitted he was wrong. Now, not everyone will admit they're wrong. And if they get caught, the only reason they're upset is because they got caught. Yeah? But they don't want to admit what they did was wrong. Some people will. Some people will. And, other people won't. Very good. So my comment was, I was very glad this person admitted he was wrong. Still a desecration of God's name, nothing to talk about. Yeah? But I was happy he admitted he was wrong. I got slammed. Demolished. Demolished. Oh, you think it's okay? You're backing what he said. I never back what he said. I was very careful what I said. Right? My comment was, I'm glad he admitted he was wrong. That was my comment. That was it. I was glad he admitted he was wrong. I didn't say anything more than that. And they used me like a dish rag. And then they boxed me in a corner and they're like, you got to tell us why I did it. You have to say why. I have to say why I did it? And they kept like boxing me in a corner. Finally, I said, okay. I led them on. I said, you want to know what the reason that he did it? I said, go ask the person. I'm not going to answer for them. I'm going to have enough time after 120 years answering for myself. Why I did this or didn't do that, whatever. We all have to answer. I have to answer for someone else. I have to answer for someone else. I'm not going to answer for someone else. Let them answer. I could give my answer. I can for sure give my answer. It's a very simple answer. I don't have to answer for them. It's not my obligation. Right? Simple answer is you want to pay taxes. That's a simple answer. Yeah? Simple answer. Nothing against paying taxes. Not against paying taxes, but he's got, a chunk of money. I want to pay tax on it. I get it. You have to pay, a third, a quarter, whatever it is, right? So, that's a significant amount of money. Very good. Very good, but he doesn't want to pay it. Okay. So money laundered. Is that going to make it better for people? Yeah. That's stealing. He should never do it. He's got to pay Uncle Sam, forget about whether it's legal or not. Whether, they have legal right to take taxes or not. That's irrelevant. They take taxes. Yeah, that's stealing. 100% it's stealing. You want me to answer for that person? I got a God-given obligation to answer for why the person did it. I give 100 answers. That's not the point. The point is let them answer. All I said, that's the last thing I ever had to do with this blog, but, all I said was, I'm glad the person admitted he did something wrong. I didn't say I was backing what the person did. I don't know how you can even read into that, right? I didn't even come close to saying that. All I said was, I'm happy he admitted he was wrong. Very good. Well, I admit he was wrong. Good. I didn't have a problem with that. Right? I don't have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, we all have to answer for ourselves. Right? And that's it. So, again, people will say, well, the law is made to be broken. The law is there for a reason. Some things make more sense. Maybe some things make less sense. Okay. Yeah, but at the end of the day, the law is there for a reason. So if it's the law of the land, if it's, if it's the law of the land, you gotta do it with the law of the land. Now again, if it's a legal loophole, it's a different issue. Let's say you have a legal loophole. That means it's legal, right? To get a tax break for whatever, but it's legal. Okay. So if it's legal, right? Throw out a philosophical question here. If it's legal, am I allowed to do it? So you're gonna say, what's the problem? There shouldn't be any problem. Why? Why is there no problem? It's legal. 100%, it's legal. Yeah. So most people would say that's not an issue. But if a person's at a higher level, even if it's legal, maybe they should be doing it. You're gonna say, what? They have to pay full price, this and that. Yeah, some people will go beyond the letter of the law. There's a famous story with Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, a blessed memory, one of the Torah giants of the last generation, nothing to talk about. And someone saw him in a pawn shop with Kiddush cup. Couldn't understand what's he doing. What's he doing in a pawn shop with this Kiddush cup? So someone gave him a Kiddush cup as a gift, and he wanted to know what the value was, according to the pawn shop. He wanted to know the value because he wanted to pay tax on it. Now, normally, if you get a gift, right, a small gift like that, let's say, it is worth $100, $150. No one's ever going to get you on taxation for it. For sure not. Yeah. But he went beyond the letter of the law. He said he got a gift, part of part of income, this and that. He wanted to know what the value was. Now, again, right, according to everybody, if you got a gift, it's not significant, right? Probably less than $15,000, $20,000. Let's say a person got a gift from a parent, right? Something like $15,000. Let's say you don't have to declare it, right? Probably you don't have to declare it, right? Past that you might have to declare it, but it doesn't matter. It's a gift, yeah. So up until a certain amount, you won't have to pay anything on it. Very good, but it's like, let's say it's $50. Let's say it's $30. Let's say it's 150. You have to go and declare it. No one's gonna say you have to declare it, right? Go to everybody. Ask any accountant. Don't just say you have to declare it. He felt he got a gift. It's part of what he makes, so he wanted to declare it. Again, that's lifting Mishur's did. Right? That's going beyond the letter of the law. That's certainly not according to the law. That's not, that's nothing to talk about. He went beyond what he needed to do. Okay, so there are people like that. Very good, right? There are people that that will do that, right? But again, the Torah says very clear, I'm not allowed to lie. There are certain things I would be allowed to lie for, right? Very few things, but there are certain things you would be allowed to lie for. In general, yeah, you're not allowed to lie. You're not allowed to lie. Period. So some would say, even if it's a legal loophole, should, if a person is really impeccable, then they should rely on it. It's going to cost you more, let's say, in the long run, maybe. But some would argue that, yeah, even if it's a legal loophole, we shouldn't use it. Okay. Others would say, and this is probably the majority opinion, others would argue no. Others would say, even though it's illegal, they would say it's a legal loophole. A legal loophole means that's legal. You would never, ever in a million years ever be prosecuted. Never. Right? This comes up also back in the day, before CDs. They had videotapes, yeah? Videotapes, anyone remembers. If you tape something, let's say something that's, I don't know, it's on cable, right? You DVR, let's say. Or back in the day, you copied it with a videotape. Right? Is that legal? Right? It's a movie, let's say. Make it easy. It's a movie. Right? All rights reserved. You can't, because it's copyright. Copyright. Now, technically, when it comes to that or it comes to music or other things, if there's copyright, you don't have a right, technically, to record it, right? To make a copy of it. Why? Because it's copyright. Now, let's say you have back in the day you had a tape, or you have this now, or even an MP3, whatever it is, right? You have a copy of, you have something. Are you allowed to make a copy of it? Now, why would you be allowed to? Because you don't want to lose it, right? You don't want to, back in the day, tapes. Let's say tapes get ruined. Still have tapes. I need to make an MP3s, but whatever. Let's say you have a tape that gets ruined. Now you're afraid it's going to get ruined. Music tape. You bought it. Very good. Very good. So the person who sang it, right, gets royalties. Very good. Can I make a copy of it? Now, really, you shouldn't be allowed to. Why? You own it. Very good. It's for your sake. You can't make a copy. But what if it's for your own usage? I understand if it's for someone else. That's stealing. They have to buy it, right? But if you make a copy for yourself and you own it for yourself, then why can't you make a backup? They're going to say you can't ever copy it, right? You can talk about let's say software as well, right? You can have expensive software as well. But you want to make a backup so it doesn't get lost, right? Technically, they can say you can't do it, right? And we can prosecute you according to the letter of the law. Yeah, no one's ever going to do it. No one's ever going to prosecute a person. But at the end, at the end of the day, to make a backup should be permissible. Now, to give that to somebody else, that you're not allowed to do. That you're not allowed to do. Bill Gates, back in the day, on this topic, said the two biggest thieves of computer software today are China and Israel. Not necessarily in that order. Yeah. The joke in Israel is there's one legal copy of every program that exists, and everything else is a copy. Right? So, so I had a question many years ago. Person buys the computer. They put certain software on it. You didn't buy it. Do you have an obligation to buy it? Is that stealing? So they know. The owners know things are going to get bootlegged. They know that. Okay. But you're not the one who did it. You go to somebody, he puts Windows on. Obviously, computer won't work otherwise. Right? He'll put Word on, he'll put some other things on. Right, let's say, but you didn't buy Word. Right? $400, $300, whatever it is, right? But you didn't buy it. Is that permissible? Is that permissible to put on your computer or not? Right? So the simple answer is you're not stealing direct. That's not direct. Yeah, why is it not direct? Because even the person who you're getting the computer from, they're putting it on, right? Let's say, but where did they get it from? Even if they themselves own it, right? Or they got it, let's say even better, they probably got it from someone else. So if they got it from someone else, so there's a Talmudic dictum that says they're already going to give up hope. So they had to change possession. Once it changes possession, right? It changed possession at least once. Then the other part, let's say, Reuven bought an original thing. He gives a copy to Shimon. And Shimon gives it to Levi, Yehuda, done or whatever. So did they transgress anything? No. Why? Because already transferred so many times, that it's okay. A person doesn't have to be, the most religious person and buy, these programs or whatever. You don't have to be, right? What happens if it's already out there? You go on the site, it's free. So you didn't steal it. Someone else stole it, right? Someone else is the thief. You're not the thief. And it's probably changed hands a million times. Once it's already changed hands a million times, yeah, then it's not your issue. Now, some people would say, maybe if Nimashur said, then according to the letter of the law, going beyond the letter of the law, you shouldn't do that. You should actually pay for it to get an original copy. Okay. But the problem is, if your system crashes, you got to find someone who's got an original copy. Yeah. Right? But again, does the person have to do that? No. What's the reason? The reason is because it's changed hands so many times. The original owner, even if they say we would prosecute this and that, yeah, they don't really have a say, So therefore, a person got it in second hand, third hand, fifth hand, 10th hand. A person can have it. It's not a problem, right? That's with the computer software. What about there? There are sites out there that have all kinds of different, program software worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, some more, some less, for all kinds of different things. All kinds of different things. Person signs up to be part of this group, right? And I will say it's free, you don't have to pay anything, right? So now you have access to all these different programs. There's also a question came up. Yeah, with programs, let's say in digital marketing. Yeah, different programs, different things. Is that permissible? So again, these programs have probably changed hands so many times that even if someone puts it on the website, it's not your issue. They're the ones, essentially, that did it. What do you do about music? Music is a similar thing. Let's say these different, groups or whatever, they get illegal things that they downloaded wherever they got it from, right? They put it on their site for free. The person's losing out on royalties. There was a case with a famous Jewish singer many, many years ago, and the only reason I know it because I sat in the rabbinical court. My rebbe, and he came in, and basically he said he made a number of albums, and someone had taken one of his songs, or maybe a few of his songs, without permission. He didn't give him permission to take it. So this person made a whole mixture, of different songs from different artists. Very good. Yeah, put it on one album and put some of his things on there also. Now they did it without permission. So then he went to the base and said, I want royalties, or I want to take off the album. I didn't get permission. I worked hard, right? These artists worked very hard, right, to produce these, produce these CDs or whatever. I spent hours, spent a lot of money doing it. Okay, it doesn't give someone the right, wherever they got it from, doesn't really matter. Yeah, doesn't really matter. But they put it on their own thing and now they sell it. Yeah, so then he wanted to sue them. Either take it off, take these deaths off the shelves, right? Or he's going to pay royalties, right? He's going to pay royalties. So there's a famous question by copyright just on this topic. There's a famous thing, I think in the 1600s, of a copy of the Rambam. That someone did a lot of work, and someone sort of, took the work the person did and printed it with all the person's, work. So the person's claiming, I did all the work, you stole it from me, you owe me. Now there's one caveat here. The caveat is there's no copyright on Torah. Torah's Hetzker, Torah's ownerless. So just because someone added a few things to what somebody did or took it, there's no copyright on Torah. So if somebody came in once to Rebbe's based in, and he put a lot of work in a certain thing, worked for many, many years, someone swiped it. Someone took all his work and printed it under their name. So this guy was rip-roaring mad because he worked very hard for many years. Now, understand, in selling books in general, you don't make a lot of money in general. I mean, unless something like goes absolutely viral, but to sell a book today, make any money from it is very rare. It's very rare. It's not it's not a field that a person's going to make money from, in general. But this person said, I worked very hard. This person stole it, right? So what happens? There's no status of copyright in Torah. So the Beis Din said, we'll give you 2 years. We'll give you 2 years. In other words, this person, whoever took it, will make an injunction. He can't do anything with it for 2 years. For 2 years. I don't know exactly what they came up for 2 years, but whatever. That was their conclusion. So this person was rip-roaring mad. It's like, listen, I put all this effort in for years and years, like 15 years. I worked like a dog on this thing. Someone swiped it. You only give me 2 years? So my Rebbe stood up and looked at him and said, listen, if you would have gone to any other rabbinical court, you wouldn't get anything. But there's no copyright on Torah. He said, you should thank us. We gave you 2 years. That was it. And he said, and he threw him out. Threw him out of the basin. That was it. He said, but you should be thankful. We gave you something. Because if you would have gone anywhere else, you wouldn't have got anything. So I told my Rebbe after this, I said, great. I said, I'm going to take one of your books. I'll add a few things myself, and I'll put it under my name. He goes, don't do it. I said, you just said there's no copyright, right? There's no status of copyright in Torah. I said, nah, so I'm going to do it. Why not? Why shouldn't I? I was kidding, obviously. I was like, why wouldn't I do it? Why not? There's no copyright. He's like, I was like, just leave me alone. Just leave me alone, right? But essentially, when it comes to Torah, right? Who has copyright on Torah? Nobody, right? Everybody says the same thing. I have my right to my interpretation. Someone else has their right to interpretation. Yeah. So there's no copyright on Torah, right? Anyone can say whatever they want, right? Rav Leff should be well. He said anyone who gets my Torah, they can put under their own name. I don't care. My Torah is hefker, right? Totally ownerless. There's certain places where he spoke, they sell his tapes or whatever. Okay, so that's they have an MP3 or whatever. So okay, that you can't take, right? But anything that's out there when it comes to Torah, same thing. You want to take my all my great ideas, you also take and put under your own name. Very good. I can't do anything. Yeah, can't. No copyright, no nothing, right? I wouldn't tell people to do it. I don't know how much it's worth, but in either case, I said tongue in cheek to him. I said, yeah, if I said I can take your Torah, put my name on it a little bit, change a few things around, put under my own name. He's like, don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah, but essentially, there's no copyright, right? The thing is, what someone here points out very good. What happened with integrity? Well, why would somebody do this? Because they want to give themselves a good name. They take someone else's thing and they want to have a good name. So that's why I read this question many years ago when I was in South America. This whole thing, someone was selling wine and they had non-Shomer Shabbos Jews watching the wine, which makes it a problem. Definitely makes the wine a problem. And whatever, all kinds of problems came out from this. One of them is I lost my job because of it, because whatever, I got I got nailed for coming out against someone in the community, which whatever, they were doing things illegally, even though they said I'm not making a dime from this and this and that. But okay. Yeah, but he knew. You're not allowed to use these type of people to watch the wine. Yeah, it makes it very problematic. Makes the wine forbidden, basically. Yeah, so I remember when this whole thing happened, right? I told me I have to call it in. I didn't go as far as I should have for different reasons, whatever. But I asked him, very simple. I left Israel after being there for 13 years. I left Israel. Here I am in South America. And because of what happened, short time afterwards, I get fired from my job. Now I'm like stuck. Now I'm stuck. Now, in order for me to get paid, at least compensation, I have to sign a document saying that I'm not going to come out against any other rabbis in the community. Not going to cause any more trouble. Otherwise, I don't get paid. So here I am in a foreign country. Yeah, total foreign country for me. Yeah, and my family. And now they're blackmailing me. So I said, there's blackmail. They said, it doesn't matter. Want to write the checks, they ain't paying you. They ain't paying you unless you sign it. Right? So anyway, that's where everyone to do. He told me what to do, whatever. But I asked him with this whole thing, I said, what happened to integrity? What happened to integrity? And he started laughing. I said, I don't know. I said something funny. He says, you're in the real world now. You see what goes on in the real world. Integrity? He said, it's a good thing you still have a connection to me. He said, otherwise, who knows where a person would be? Yeah. A person can justify anything. Anything. Yeah, in order to make, a few extra bucks. They can justify it. They can have big hats, long pants, long coats, right? It doesn't matter. So where's integrity? And he laughed. He laughed. He said, you want people to have integrity? I say, I would think so. People should be on the up and up. That's what the Torah says to do. Okay, we don't always do what it says. Very good. Everyone's got an evil inclination. Greater the person, greater the evil inclinations, we always say. Okay, also true. But even with all that, so I said, it's one thing, you're going to drink the wine yourself. You're going to give it to your family to drink. That's one thing. You want to rely on who knows what? Okay. Yeah, you want to sell it to the public? You want to give it over to the public and you're machti as a rabbi causing other people to sin? That's a much bigger problem. Right? That's a much bigger problem. Right? So you say, again, I can understand to a certain point, whatever you do in your house, you do in your house. Okay. But this is for the masses. How can you mess up the masses in the process? Oh, one person says you're taking away his livelihood, right? The other person says, I'm not taking money from it. Somebody's obviously lying. Yeah, it's very clear someone's lying over here. Yeah, so, I had to take the fall for, obviously for that. But, right, regardless, it's one thing what you do in your house. What you do for the masses, and you're telling someone, you can drink this wine and it's kosher. I did my job to warn people, as much as I could. Yeah, not to drink this wine, unless it comes out with certain, unless, the certain rabbinic supervision, that's not this rabbinic supervision on that wine. Okay. That I go as far as I could for different reasons. But I would say, I would say that, to me, it was a little bit shocking, but when I sat in the basement for once a week for 5 years, I shouldn't have been so surprised because people coming to this rabbinical court, they're all other Orthodox Jews. Not people coming off the street like going to cheap rabbinate, right? It's a totally different thing. There are people there, big hats, long coats, this and that, and people basically lying, lying and conniving and, other things. And, what my Rebbe would say, it's a good thing you have a connection to me. Otherwise, you could have Chalisha Sadas. You might give up hope. Like, oh, you became religious to see how Orthodox Jews are. So I always say, you don't mix up, Jews and Judaism just because someone looks the part. That's what we said before. Someone looks the part, very good. Maybe they are inside. They are the real deal, right? Maybe not, right? You don't know. People, when it comes to money, people do funny things. It's one of the things the Gemara in Eruvin says to check a person. Right? You check him kaso, kiso, and koso. Kaso, how he gets angry. Kiso, how he handles money. Koso, how they drink. Right? 3 ways. The Gemara says, to check a person. So, when it comes to money, again, some people may be desperate. Other things may happen, and they just lose their mind. They'll squash you, make a few more bucks. Right? And they don't care. Why don't they care? Why don't they care? Because they're desperate. Because they're absolutely desperate. Okay, doesn't mean it's right. That way, that doesn't mean it's right. But this gets back to the question. So, if a person's person's out there, supposed to look like an Orthodox Jew, your integrity has to be impeccable. You do not want to give secular Jews or non-Jews any if and or but ability to say anything negative about you. Nothing. You want to be 100% impeccable, so the only thing you want them to say is thank God his Rebbe taught him Torah. Thank God his parents taught him Torah. That's what you want a person to say. But you don't want to give them, whatever their bad stereotype is, you do not want to fit the stereotype. Not at all, because that makes a desecration of God's name. But again, you can't say, "Well, Rebbe, that's business. That's the way people do things." Yeah, it's Torah prohibition. Torah prohibition. You're lying. It's fraud. A lot of other things involved. Yeah, and it makes everybody look bad. Everybody look bad. And there's collective punishment. Nobody wants to hear that, but a secular, Orthodox Jew or secular Jew doesn't really matter. They do something wrong, it makes the press. Let's say, for argument's sake, they did something wrong. Whether it's more egregious, less egregious, they did something wrong. All Jews are going to get blamed, right? You don't see that by any other group, right? You do not see that by any other group. Imagine an Italian in Brooklyn, right, did something wrong, and say, "We're going to burn Italy. No more cannoli. No more cannolis. We're going to burn Brooklyn down. We're going to burn Italy down." Never. Never. A Jew does something wrong, any nationality, unless the person like totally racist. One black person does something, blame all blacks or Asians or Hispanics or whatever, right? That 100% would be, racist. A Jew does something wrong, again, could be a secular Jew, worse if it's an Orthodox Jew. Everybody gets blamed. Now, there's only one reason. It's only one reason, because the Gemara says, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lezeh. All Jews are intertwined. All Jews are intertwined. During the war, secular Jews getting rounded up, they couldn't understand, right? They said, "We're just like you. We, fought in your wars. We married your women. We, go to universities. Take these Orthodox Jews. They're different. They don't keep your laws. They don't do this. They don't do that." And they didn't care, right? They didn't care. A Jew is a Jew. That's it. It doesn't matter which side, right? Obviously, your mother's side, the person's a Jew. Very good. Your father's side, we don't hold. The person's a Jew. Okay. Did not, may his name be blotted out, may he rot wherever he is. He did not make any distinction. 100%. 100% did not make any distinction. Okay. Since it didn't make any distinction, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. But secular Jews were certainly going out of their minds because they couldn't understand why they should be singled out. Yeah, single out Orthodox Jews, right? As all the anti-Semites say. They don't keep your laws. Yeah, they don't eat your food. They don't keep your holidays. They don't this. Right, exactly what Haman said. Right, in the Book of Esther. Right, you have secular Jews or anti-Semites will say the same thing, same exact thing. This is what you have to do. Right? This is what you have to do. Right? Bottom line, that's. And if you don't do that, what's going to happen? You're in trouble, right? You're certainly in trouble. But again, what's the point? What's the point of all this? Is that you got to be impeccable. Jews have to be impeccable. And if you do the wrong thing, everyone gets blamed. 100%. 100% everyone gets blamed. So if a person's in business, right, or whatever they do, they're out there and they look like an Orthodox Jew. That's why it's such a huge responsibility. If a person's got to look the part, they act the part, but act the part in the right way. Because if you don't act the part in the right way, what's the person going to say, for better or for worse? What are they going to say? "Oh, see, these Orthodox Jews, they cut in line. See, these Orthodox Jews, they cut corners. See, they do this or they do that." You do not want to give anyone any level of ability to say anything. You do not want them to say anything. Yeah? All you want them to do is say that it's a good thing this person was created. Yeah? That this person is doing what God said. Yeah? Right? That's what we want. But integrity, there should be integrity. 100% there should be integrity. Right? There 100% should be integrity. Yeah? And what happens if there's no integrity? Then the whole system goes out the window. You can have people lie, right? That's the whole point. We said before. Yeah? And if a person, God forbid, is going to lie, you better darn well not get caught. Because if you get caught, you make a desecration of God's name. Right? And that is pretty bad. Right? That's what we mentioned. Now, comes along the Kli Yakar. The Kli Yakar goes further. And he says, so we said before, the question was, why, what's the difference between this verse and the next verse? Why the laws that make sense come first, and the laws that don't make sense come after, and the order's reversed, right? So we saw this difference between this world and the next world, and getting reward in this world, etc. And then he says like this, see how far this goes. He says, the Torah says in the next verse, the very end of the verse, right? It says you're going to guard the laws that make sense, that don't make sense, and the laws that make sense, and you're going to do them. The person is going to do them, and you're going to live by them. It says, "V'chai b'hem ani Hashem." The end of the verse, it says you're going to live by them. I am the Lord your God. Now, Rashi over there says, what does it mean? You're going to live by them. Right? What does it mean? It means in the next world. In other words, the reward you're going to get, it's not for this world. Right? It'll be for the next world. You're going to live for the sake of the next world. You're going to get that reward in the next world. But we said before, the order is the opposite. Right? In verse 4, it says, Mishpatim first. Right? It said laws that I do understand, and then Chukim or Chukosai, laws I don't understand. And in the fifth verse, it says the opposite. Very good. So it says Kuyakar. Very good. It's the opposite order. And what is it talking about? Just like I have to keep the laws that don't make sense. Right? And if I keep the laws that don't make sense, I guard myself, against them. Very good. Yeah, I keep them. But also going to give me a portion of the world to come. All the more so if I keep laws that make sense. Yeah, but he says fact that the laws that don't make sense. Why are we going to keep them? Because God said to keep them. Very good. God said he's going to keep it. So God says we have to keep it. Okay. So the laws that make sense, I can understand more. Because why would we keep them? We keep them because, they're universal. They would apply to non-Jews also, right? A lot of them. Because they make sense. They make logical sense according to the Torah. Good. So I'll keep them. It'll make sense to keep them. And I'll have portions of the world to come. Very good. Right? All things being equal. Now what happens? What happens to laws? I don't understand. Yeah. What's the benefit of keeping them? What's the benefit of not eating pig? What's the benefit of the red heifer, even though we can't do it today? What's the benefit of keeping kosher even? Right? You don't mix milk and meat. That's also law doesn't make any sense. Right? Because I have kosher meat, I have kosher cheese. Right? Who says if I mix them, it becomes forbidden? The Torah does. But if both are permitted, and then all of a sudden I put them together through an element of heat, it becomes forbidden. It's also law doesn't make sense. So a person can ask the question, okay, laws that make sense I'm going to keep, and obviously, there's an idea about having a portion of the world to come. I'm keeping what I'm supposed to be keeping, things that make sense, but that's helping me. Not just in the next world, it's helping me now. Why? Because these things make sense, right? I'm going to keep them. I'm going to do the best of my ability to keep them at the highest level because they obviously make sense to do. Okay, that I can understand. Yeah, that I can understand. But the question's going to be like this. Yeah, question is going to be, what about things that don't make sense? Why am I going to keep them? What's the purpose of keeping them? Imagine a, what do you call it? A person comes to synagogue, right, on Sukkot, right, in the middle of Hallel, in the morning. And you see these Jews with their palm fronds, they're living on steroids, they're shaking it like this, and they're shaking it like that. That doesn't make so much sense, right? We have to understand it. Obviously, the best of our ability, very good. But what's the point? What's the point of doing things that make no sense? Not wearing clothing made of wool and linen. Keeping kosher. We can understand to a certain extent maybe why some of the things are given. Okay. Right? But at the end of the day, what does it have to do with helping me? Now, simple explanation is any mitzvah I do, because God commanded it, is strengthening my soul. Very good. That's what it's doing, right? It's strengthening my soul. Okay, so that I can understand that to a certain extent. But says the Kliyakar over here, laws that don't make any sense, a person doesn't feel the purpose. They don't feel any purpose. Yeah, I'm doing these things. Okay. So you say in spiritual terms, and you should feel like this, and whatever it's doing for your soul, and we'll all play the guitar and sing Kumbaya. Beautiful. That's all beautiful. But what's the purpose? What's the purpose? I'm not wearing a sweater or a jacket that has wool and linen together. That doesn't seem like a purpose, right? Or any of these other things. Right? Now, again, you could say any mitzvah I do, whether I understand it or not, right? Let's say it's a mitzvah that we don't understand, even better, right? A person can say, I don't see the benefit. I don't see the benefit. But he says over here, the fact that you don't feel it, yeah, you don't feel it, but every action you do for the sake of heaven, again, we're not talking Kabbalistic interpretation, right? You don't, you're doing it for the sake of heaven. And he said, and what's the purpose of doing it even if you don't feel it? What's the purpose of doing it? You're doing it to establish what God wants you to do. Regardless of whether you understand it or not, regardless of whether you feel it. Now, some people will say, I'm only going to keep things that I understand. Things I don't understand, I'm not going to do. Now, to a certain extent, that makes sense. Why wouldn't you do it? Because I don't see the benefit. Yeah, you don't see the benefit. Okay. What about the things you do understand? There are probably 50,000 different reasons that could be why you should do it. You may understand the most simplest one. Okay. The ones that you don't understand, I could, to a certain extent, maybe understand why a person wouldn't do it. Because what are they going to say? Doesn't resonate. We don't live in an agricultural society anymore. We don't live in this type of world anymore. And people don't understand what the point is. They don't understand the point. If they don't understand the point, why do it? So what does Kuyaka here say? You do it for the sake of heaven, because God commanded you. That's it. Right? You do it whether you understand or not, because God's telling you it's to your benefit. You don't feel it, whatever, it doesn't matter. The creator of the world is telling you it's to your benefit. Good. Totally to your benefit. Okay. Now, is that a leap of faith? Some people may say it's a leap of faith. Okay. But we're keeping Torah mitzvahs because it's based on knowledge. Yeah, very good. But he says, even keeping laws that I do understand, yeah, it could be these laws you already got merit in this world, right? Maybe you got some merit in this world for keeping things that do make sense. Things that don't make sense, that's probably for the next world. But he said you could say for the fact that you get benefit from it, whether you think you do or not, doesn't really matter. God's telling you get benefit from it, and that benefit keeps the world going. Now you're going to say, how can that be? I don't feel it. Right? Now, some people would say, Torah, some people, enjoy Torah and come to Torah because of the intellectual stimulation. Yeah. Intellectual stimulation. Let's say. Some people come to Torah based on what I call touchy-feely, spiritual terms. They like the spiritual side of it. Not just okay, do the mitzvahs, this and that. But they feel something. Yeah. But there are going to be a lot of people. There are going to be a lot of people out there that, again, for some it's going to resonate in the heart. It's going to resonate inside. For other people, they may not see the benefit. They'll do it anyway, right? Let's say. But for some people, it's going to be very hard because they don't see what the point is. They're not going to understand, and they don't really care. It's just right now, it's an excuse. They just want to do what they want to do, and they don't care. But in general, right? In general, the answer is because God's telling you it's good. God's telling you there's a benefit. Oh, you don't see the benefit? Right now, what would some people argue? What would some people argue? They would say, I know better. I don't see no benefit, there's no benefit. Okay. God himself is calling the shots. If God himself is calling the shots, then what do? You take his word for it. Right? In other words, he's got a track record. He's telling you what you should do or not do. He's telling you this is going to benefit you whether you understand it or not. Now, for some people, that's not going to be enough. They'll throw it out as an excuse, but for some people, they may say, I'll feel it. It doesn't resonate. Do we care if it resonates or not? Right? What did he say? What did the Kli Yakar say? You're doing it for the sake of heaven in order to keep what God says. To keep what God's commandments are. Right? So he said you could say you're doing it, there's a benefit. And the whole world is dependent on that benefit because the people are keeping Torah mitzvahs, regardless of whether you understand it or not. There's a benefit for the world, even if we don't see it, but the world benefits. The world benefits. He says, nonetheless, you're talking about in the physical world, right? Even if a person is not wearing, shatnez, is not wearing wool and linen together, very good. Yeah. So a person could ask, okay, where is the benefit in this world? Don't know. But there's a benefit. There's a benefit. That's what the world stands on. The world stands on the fact that Jews keep Torah mitzvahs. Yeah? It's what it says in the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Yeah, that, after going through the genealogy of who got Torah from who, right? Then it says the Torah stands on three things. Torah, Avodah, Gimel Chasadim. Avodah means really service of the heart, prayer, right? Or sacrifices. And Gimel Chasadim are ways of acts of loving kindness. Acts of loving kindness. And Torah. Now, if anyone, if at one point, at any time, nobody's learning Torah, the world goes back to Tohu Vavohu, goes back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, right? That original chaos, kind of like the back of that wet up when I always talk about. Anyone knows what I'm talking about? Regardless, that would be bad. Yeah, so this is a benefit, says the Kli Yakar, this is a benefit to the world. Why? Because Jews are keeping Torah, regardless of whether they understand 100%, or not, or things make more sense or less sense. Irrelevant, right? Totally irrelevant. You got to keep it because you got to keep it. But what does it do? What does keeping Torah do? Now, we don't see it. We don't fathom it per se. Yeah, because we're being persecuted left and right, in different ways. So it's very hard to see in this world. But what's he telling you? The entire establishment of the world, yeah, that's what the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says. That the world stands on three things. One of them is Torah. So if a person is keeping Torah mitzvahs, even things that don't make sense, right, that are not logical, very good. What does that do? It strengthens the world. That's what he tells you. It strengthens this world. He says, nonetheless, even though keeping the Torah in this world strengthens the physical world, very good, however that works, he's telling you, nonetheless, you can also merit for this service the next one. Yeah, how do I know? Where do I know? Because what does the Torah say now? The Torah says, Ki ani Hashem. Yeah, I am the Lord your God. You're keeping the Torah, regardless of whether you understand it or not, right? At whatever level, these things that don't make sense, you're keeping it because I told you to keep it. Right? You're keeping it because I am the Lord your God. I established you to keep this. This is the command you have to do. Right? Just like it's brought down in the Medrash that a person should not say, that shouldn't say it's impossible to eat chazer, right? It's impossible to eat pig, and my soul is like disgusted by it, right? That a person shouldn't say. What should they say? He said, really? Probably very tasty. Yeah, it's probably enjoyable. But what's the problem? My God says I can't eat it, right? He made a decree. He made a decree you can't eat it. So what's he telling you? He says you're going to keep what the Torah says, even laws that don't make rational sense, because God commanded it, right? And when God commanded it, He didn't tell you. He didn't tell you you're doing it because that these things in and of themselves are bad. Some things are for sure. But when it comes to pig or anything else, what's the problem? What's the problem? It's a divine decree. That's the problem. Because there are people that will say this. How could if you know how a pig is raised and this and that, how could you ever eat it? Most people don't care. Bacon is bacon. Like what's the big deal? So what do I care how the pig lives? Yeah, who cares? We're eating the bacon. What's the problem? Right? For people who've ever eaten it, okay, maybe totally unhealthy and kill you in the process. Okay, yeah, it's not tasty. People say it's tasty. People say it's very tasty. Yeah, what's the problem? Eating ham, it's not tasty. Tasty. Yeah. No one said, so a person shouldn't say, "Oh, this is disgusting." Some people may say that, but he says the person shouldn't say it. That it's impossible to eat this, and my soul is like disgusted by it. Yeah, person shouldn't say that. What should they say? No, really, it's probably very tasty. Really, it's probably very good. Maybe unhealthy also, but probably very good. Probably very tasty. But what's the problem? What's the obvious problem? God says you can't eat it. That's the problem, right? So it's not just as he says over here, right? It's not just about the fact what I do in this world. Yeah, in other words, that it does affect this world, right? That it absolutely does, however that works. But he's also telling you that whatever I do also has an effect where I'm going to be in the next world, right? Depending on what I do wrong and how it offsets or it doesn't offset, whatever the case is, right? But why? Right? That's the $1 million question. Why? And both verses say the exact same thing. Right? At the end of the 5th verse, it says, "V'chai b'hem, you shall live by them, ani Hashem. I am the Lord. I am the Lord your God." By the 4th verse, it says, keep those laws that don't make sense, go in their ways. I am the Lord your God. Right? Same thing. So you're going to keep them regardless of whether I understand more, whether I understand less. Right? I'm going to keep them because God is the one who told me to keep it. Now, one other thing, and that is the Torah says over here, and other places as well, you should live by the Torah. Now, the normal understanding of living by the Torah means I live by it, I don't die by it. Now, there are certain things. You have the big three, right? You have immorality, murder, and idolatry. That basically say that if a person, Jew or non-Jew, right? A Jew or non-Jew put a gun to your head and say, "I want you to bow down to this guy and stick," right? Or show a little fat guy, Mr. Buddha himself, reference to JC or Buddha. They say bow down or die for a Jew. Anytime, any place, you got to be willing to die, right? But there are things that I don't have to die for. I could transgress. The Torah wants me to live by it, not die by it. But if there's a situation you're obligated to die, then you're obligated to die. Very good. Right? Very good. But when it says v'chai b'hem, that you should live by the Torah, normally it means that I should not die from it. Right? So remember many years ago, I was giving these classes over the phone. So someone asked me, if at Shabbos you're choking on a chicken bone, right, or a fish bone, do you have to, are you allowed to take it out? Are you allowed to take it out? So no one can see my expression, my face. I was doing it over the phone at the time. So I said, I said, nope, you got to die. Can't take it out on Shabbos, you got to die. 5 seconds, nobody says anything. 10 seconds, no one says anything. After 20, 25 seconds of silence, I said, no. I said, I was just kidding. I said, there's a mitzvah to live by the Torah, right? Pikuach nefesh doche kol haTorah. Pikuach nefesh, saving a life, you throw out the entire Torah. You desecrate Shabbos. You do whatever you can to save a life, in general. If you can minimize, let's say, Shabbos desecration, okay. If not, not. Right? But there's a mitzvah, the Torah don't want you to die. Torah, if there's a case where you have to, okay. Yeah. Right? If it's kiss the cross or die, you have to die. If you don't die, and let's say you're a secret Jew, whatever, you transgress the Torah prohibition, not sanctifying God's name. Now again, no one should have to go through this. Right? But there are many a Jew, some more religious, less religious, that refused to kiss the cross and died. Right? Many pogroms. You have the Inquisition. Many people died that way. Etc. Idolatry is a big thing. Immorality is a big thing. If a Jew or non-Jew would say, go kill this person, I'm going to kill you. You have to die. Right? You're not allowed to kill someone. Yeah, directly. Right? There are certain things you do have to die for. Right? Now, nobody wants to die. No one wants to go through it. But at the same time, if that is the case, and that is what I'm supposed to do, then that's what I'm supposed to do. Then you have to give up your life. Yeah? And most other things, you don't have to give up your life for. Right? But there is a general rule. Right? This is what I want to point out here. There is a general rule. The Torah says, live by it, not die by it. Which means, I'll give an example. If your life is in danger. Let's say better. Are you allowed to put your life in danger? Right? The answer is no. In general. Person doesn't, they did it. Okay. Right? But if they put themselves in danger and they die from it, that can be called suicide. Yeah, a famous story. I think I mentioned this either last week or mentioned it last night, because I always bring up this topic and talk about danger. There was a football player about 30 years ago, more, 40 years ago probably, 45 years ago, that jumped in to save 2 people swimming or 3 people that were drowning. And I think he saved 1 or 2 of them, and he and someone else died. But he didn't know how to swim. He wasn't a good swimmer, per se. So you can say, what you do? Let them drown? You don't jump in if you don't know how to swim. So what happened? Why did he die? Right? The obvious answer is because God took him. But why did he take him? He's 28 years old. He was 28 years old, 26 or 28 years old. Yeah, he was a football player. So why did God take him? So I don't really have an answer, right? The only thing is that, that was his time to die. Okay. But God saw nothing, he didn't see anything coming out of him that was going to be good or whatever. He didn't have any extra lives. Play a video game, you get extra lives. He didn't have any extra lives. He didn't have anything. He didn't have anything to save himself. He didn't have mitzvahs to guard him. Maybe if he did any mitzvahs in his life, maybe the mitzvahs would have shielded him. Maybe he would have lost the merit of some of his mitzvahs in the next world, right? And that could have stopped him from dying, potentially, right? A person saved, let's say, God forbid, a person get in a horrible accident, they get saved. Yeah, they got saved. That doesn't matter. Broken bones, rehabilitation, other things. Why getting saved could be God took away some of your merit in the next world. Some of the merit of your mitzvahs saved you. Very good. Right? Saved you. Okay. Yeah. You don't want to use any of those mitzvahs for that, but that could be. So in this case, let's say this guy didn't have that. He didn't have any merits to come up and plead that you save his life. Yeah. He had no extra lives. Where do our extra lives come in potentially? The mitzvahs that we do. Now, the mitzvahs that we do can save our lives. Now, God could take some away of that merit, 100%. You take away some of that merit, and you end up dying. Maybe you got injured. I don't know. Whatever it is. But it was a dangerous situation. You came out of it miraculously, right? Let's say. So what happened? You had either people needed you, so God didn't take you, right? Or some of the merit of the mitzvahs that you did got used up. But you're still alive, right? let's say you had, 20 extra lives. So what did God do? So he saved you, but he took away 15. You only have 5 extra lives left, right? But that's what mitzvahs do. They protect. They don't offset, right? They protect. One example, famous story of Cheskel Abramsky, who has a memory, head of the base in London. There was a Jew that was a fighter pilot that was bombing on a daily basis, bombing against the Germans, risked his life every day. So Cheskel Abramsky asked him, like, how are you doing spiritually? Right, how are you doing spiritually? So he said, thank God, but he said, you should know, on Shabbos, because of my nerves and everything I do, I smoke on Shabbos. But I know, he said, this fighter pilot said, that God's going to excuse it because of the self-sacrifice I'm doing, risking my life every day. So Cheskel Abramsky told him, you're making a mistake. You're making a serious mistake. The fact that you risk your life every day, to bomb the Nazis, Yamach Shemam V'Zichram, yeah, very good. Yeah, that you get tremendous reward for. The fact you desecrate Shabbos on purpose because of your nerves, let's say, that doesn't offset, right? That, one thing you get reward for the mitzvah you did, tremendous mitzvah, very true. But that doesn't mean you're not going to pay the price otherwise, right? For other things you did. So what's the point? So the point is, when a person does something, when a person does a mitzvah, that gives him power, gives him strength. It's like having an extra life. So even if a person goes through some sort of difficulty or, God forbid, tragedy, but they're still intact. Now, it could be, just throwing this out there, it could be that why they get saved. Could be for any number of reasons. One is that even the person really deserved to die. Why Rav Elpian brings this down a number of times. He said, Maria brings it down the name of Rav Elpian. Rav Elpian, one of the Torah giants of the last generation, the big Balik Musar of the last generation. Rav Elpian said that if a person wants to try and guarantee they're going to live a long life, they should be mizasek with the tzibur. They should work with the community, right? Do volunteer work, other things where people need them. Because if people need them and they're indispensable, then even if God had a right to take their life, right, he's not going to do it. He's going to give them extra years because people need them, right? He's going to give them extra life. Now, it could be he could take them anyway, but in general, he said that helps the person, to gain extra life because he's helping others and he's working with others. So Rav Elpian would say, that's a good thing to do, right? They help others, you volunteer, people need you, etc. Because even if, God forbid, you did something wrong, where there's a bad decree, where there's a horrific decree, then God may not take you because other people need you, right? Now, could be also, let's say, okay, they find someone else, right? Maybe better, or, whatever. Then a person's in trouble, because then if a person is dispensable, so to speak, in God's eyes, obviously, if they are dispensable, regardless of what they've done, regardless of what they've done, then God could take them, right? But Rav Elpian is telling you a general thing. He's telling you, things could offset this, but he's telling you in general, you want to try and guarantee that you live a long life in this world, and a long, prosperous life, not necessarily financially, but whatever, you live a long life, you want to have health problems and other things, you work with others. You help others, right? People need you. People depend on you, right? For good things, obviously not for bad things. He said, that can guarantee you life, right? That can certainly guarantee you, longer life, right? But again, a person, should keep in mind, I don't want to get too depressed over this, but a person should keep in mind that if something happens to them, and they come out, from, I don't know, some sort of tragedy, whatever it may be, it could very well be that they came out of it because they had extra merit. The extra merit protected them. Now, the only issue is, even if that extra merit protected them, so let's say, I don't know, in their spiritual bank account, they have 1,500,000, 420 mitzvahs they've done. Some better, some worse, very good, right? Some worse, some better. Okay. They're in a really bad accident. God could have taken their life. And so, okay, they go into rehabilitation. Maybe they come up without a scratch, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. Okay. Regardless of all that, they could have just lost a million mitzvahs right there. But those million mitzvahs protected them. Absolutely protected them. Now, with this football player, he didn't have anything to protect him, seemingly. Again, I'm not a prophet, I'm not the son of a prophet, so I'm not saying you, I'm not telling you this is the way it is. Yeah, I'm telling you this is the way it could be, right? This is the way 100% the way it could be. Yeah, but you have an extra merit. So if he didn't have any extra merit, yeah, so then why is God going to leave him in the world? God has no purpose to leave him in the world, right? He had no purpose to leave him in the world, but he had no protection. That's the point. He had no protection. All right. Somebody asked, how can the pilot who was actually deployed in combat keep Shabbos when he's on constant missions? He didn't have to go on Shabbos. He wasn't forced to go on Shabbos. Yeah, he was able to keep Shabbos. Yeah, other people went on Shabbos. He didn't have to. Let argument's sake, he didn't have to go on Shabbos. He was able to do that, right? Now, if that's saving lives, could he have gone on Shabbos? Probably. Probably. Probably would have been permitted, right? Because he's saving future lives, potentially. And it is war, right? I'm not saying you have every right to desecrate Shabbos for anything, right? But it could be. That could be. But I tell you even simpler, you got other people doing it on Shabbos. So they have a rotation. You have a rotation. Shabbos doesn't go. He goes Saturday night. He goes Sunday. Whatever it is. They have a rotation. So that probably is less of an issue. But it could be saving lives. Maybe he would have permission, but it doesn't matter. He kept Shabbos. Yeah, he was able to keep Shabbos. But his claim was that God's going to look the other way because of it. And it's not true. Was that when he returned from combat? No, he didn't go. I'm saying he kept Shabbos. Right? Let's say he kept Shabbos. The only thing is he broke Shabbos by smoking. Doesn't Hashem understand severe mental incompatibility? So that's the whole question. That is, that's the whole question. If the person is mentally stable, if they're mentally healthy in general, it's okay. They may feel the needs, let's say, they may feel that need, okay. But who says because of it that justifies the fact he can desecrate Shabbos? Rav Cheskel Abramsky was telling him that's not an excuse. Just because you risk your life, which is a big thing, it's not a small thing, but just because he's risking his life doesn't give him the right to desecrate Shabbos because of his mental health. Find something else to do. Take his mind off it. Why does he need to do that? You can find something else that's permitted. You can say that's the only thing. We can say that about other things that find a way to desecrate Shabbos and justify it, right? Justify it for any reason. Oh, a person's a diehard sports fan. Their team is playing Friday night. You can't go without seeing. Otherwise, going to go into some drunken stupor and he'll go out of his mind. Now you can say, okay, that's an extreme. You got to say that's an extreme. That's not the same thing. I don't know. I can make a lot of cases for a number of things where a person could say that their mental health will deteriorate if they can't do X, Y, or Z, right? And they have to do it on Shabbos. Yeah, I come up with a number of scenarios where people blow it off and say it's not the same thing. Okay, yeah, but you can justify it in any number of ways. Any number of ways. There's a case of if a toddler less than 3 years old is screaming, kicking, and they're on the street. There's no Eruv, right? There's no Eruv. They're allowed to pick the child up. Because the child can actually walk themselves. But you're allowed to pick the child up on Shabbos if they're screaming, and throwing an absolute, tantrum. Problem is they can walk themselves. They can't walk themselves, a different issue, but they can walk themselves. Yeah. So the Gemara already says that a child can get hysterical, can absolutely get hysterical. They could get so hysterical it could put them in a dangerous situation. They could faint, they could throw up, I don't know. Many different scenarios, things could happen. In that case, because the potential of a dangerous situation, you have to wait and see if that's what happens. Unless you can't calm the child down. But in a dangerous situation like that, you can pick the child up. That's a different issue, right? That's a legitimate thing because that could lead to a dangerous situation. This he's got, he's got a little bit nerves. Okay. And he's risking his life. Okay. And he's got anxiety. So let him take medication. Medication's a lot easier. Yeah, let him take medication for it. He's got a throbbing headache. Let him take Tylenol. Let him take something stronger, right? Let's say. Say wakes up in a sweat, this and that. That's the only thing that calms him down. I don't know. There are other ways the person can deal with it. There are other ways. It doesn't have to be that way. The person say that's the only way. It's not true. That's what he's saying. That's what Bromsky was saying. That's not the only way. There are other ways you can deal with it without desecrating Shabbos. Yeah, that was the point. But again, if someone has severe mental health issues. Now, if there, a person, let's say, is schizophrenic, bipolar. Yeah, they for sure have to see, psychologists, psychiatrists on a regular basis. And most likely they have to be on medication. For sure they have to be on medication. Now, if that's true, what about on Shabbos? Normally not allowed to take medication in general on Shabbos. In this case, it'd be permissible because it's for their mental health. Yeah, it's for sure for their mental health. So that's okay. Right? That would be okay. Who says that's the only thing they can take? Right? The person may say, this is what calms my nerves. Okay. I'll take a little bit of Valium. That won't calm his nerves? A little bit. I'm not saying a lot. We're not going to get addicted. Right? Let him take Valium. Well, couldn't he take Valium? He's probably not alive anymore. But let him take Valium. What's the problem? Let him take something that's going to soothe, You think that doesn't work. Or this won't work. This is the only thing that's going to work. I don't know about that. You do other things in order that you don't desecrate Shabbos. That's the point. You do other things, right? You do other things. Someone says that God tests our faith for sure. Every last thing you do in this world is a test. It's all a test. That's what we're here for. Either we pass the test or we fail the test, or we go up and down like a yo-yo. But you have to be in this world in order to get to the next world. Now, what's the level you have to reach? Nobody knows. The Ramchal says in Derech Hashem there's a minimal level. There's an absolute minimal level. Person has to reach it. He doesn't tell us what it is because he doesn't know. Nobody knows, right? But we're in this world to be tested. That's the bottom line, right? That's the bottom line. Why couldn't we use the secondary flame? What's the difference? You're not allowed to light a flame on Shabbos. Even if you have, let's say you have a flame. You have, I don't know, candles that are being lit. Candles that are lit. Could a person light a cigarette or light a candle for no usage? Yeah, even for any usage. Doesn't matter. Can a person light a candle from a candle on Shabbos? No. That was easy. On a festival, you could. On Shabbos, you can't. Right? That should be forbidden. Should be forbidden. Right? So secondary flame would help in this case. Right? That shouldn't help. Someone says within Jewish tradition, we say the prophecy ended after the last prophets. Very good. How do our sages understand divine guidance today? Oh, is there any view that God could still raise prophet figures in our time? No. That's also easy. Right? The only prophets today are either imbeciles or little children. Right? There are great rabbis that can have divine inspiration, low form of prophecy. Right? But if you get guidance from somebody who, is very much steeped in Torah, yeah, and they give advice, and they should be listened to. What's the problem? Right? What's the only, you got to say, what if they gave bad advice? Okay, then they shouldn't be giving advice. But, not everything they say, not everything they say is going to turn out the way a person wants. Right? I mentioned this many times. A person can get advice from great people, and what happens? Right? What can happen? You don't come out smelling like a rose, but doesn't mean what's the right thing to do. Right? So a person at a certain age, the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, is worthy to give advice. But the only reason they're worthy to give advice is if they have proper Torah knowledge. Not everyone has the ability to give advice. Yeah? Not everybody has that ability. And there are times where someone may ask something and a person has to know, if it's beyond their pay grade or not, whether they have capability of helping the person or they pass them on to someone else, right? But just because there's no prophecy today does not mean people can't give guidance, right? And the reason is because if they're very much steeped in Torah, then Torah covers everything in general, right? It should cover everything. So therefore, they should be able to give good advice. A, if they know what they're doing. B, if they got good people behind them, they can ask, different things. And again, they have to be steeped in Torah. They have to, not everything is necessarily black and white, right? Things are not black and white. A person should answer straight away unless they really know, right? Or, you consult with other people. But that's not an inconsistency that we don't have prophecy. And the fact that even when there was prophecy, people didn't want to listen. You look at Isaiah, you look at Jeremiah, people want to kill them. They don't want to listen to them, even though they have prophecy, right? So, in certain ways, prophecy not the end to end all things. Because even though they warned the Jewish people, a lot of people didn't like them. Yeah, they don't like them giving Mussar. They don't want to hear Mussar. Okay. Yeah, but just because there's no prophecy today doesn't mean people can't give advice if they know what they're doing. There are people, I would say that they have to know what they're doing. If they don't know, if they don't know what they're doing, or they give bad advice, yeah, that's a major red flag. It's a major red flag. Someone says tzitzis for non-Jews will never convert. No, they shouldn't wear them. 100% they shouldn't wear them. If a person intends to convert, it's one thing. Some people say don't wear them until right before conversion. If they want to look the part, they want to wear them, they could. Right? 100% they can. But if they're not going to convert, then yeah. Then they definitely shouldn't. Yeah, someone asked before, I want to deal with this. Someone asked before, yeah. What happens? Creepy couples. Sensual women. Yeah, chit chat, small talk. Oh, I want you to meet my husband. Okay. He crossed the mechitza. Okay, so it bothers you, leave. You don't have to make a scene. Why do you have to make a scene? Okay, if it bothers you, then there's no reason to stay there. But if someone goes to a synagogue, I'm going to say in general, and there's something there that doesn't bother them, then you should kiss the ground. You should absolutely kiss the ground, right? What's the reason to kiss the ground? Because you're going to find fault with all kinds of things. All kinds of things. They're going to be people that sneeze too loud. They're going to be people that talk in the middle of prayer. They're going to be people that, walk in and out, walk up and down the aisle. They're going to be a lot of things, a lot of potential things, especially if you're a guy and you pray 3 times a day, that will bother a person. That seemingly will bother a person. Now, is that normal? It's normal. 100% it's normal. A person can say something to them, try and say something in a nice way, like, it's nice, it's not nice to sneeze in someone's face, or other hygienic things. You could pull them aside and do that. Or people making chit chat and this and that, you tell them to be quiet, right? You don't have to doesn't mean you have to make a scene, right? But again, in a lot of these synagogues, people are going to come. They're not necessarily there to pray. They're more to socialize. You want to pray, so I tell you, go somewhere, wherever the women's section is, and sit in a corner. And sit in a corner somewhere. Or sit somewhere where there's no one else, so no one else can bother you. If you can't do that, then you can do it in a certain way. You can't make a scene, obviously. Shouldn't make a scene, right? But, you have to realize this is part of the process. Yeah? You got to come to synagogue, nothing's perfect. Nothing's perfect. Yeah? So there are things that will bother us, okay? So you have to know how to deal with it, right? You don't have to flee, move to another place. If you can't move to another place, then leave. You just walk out. That's the only thing you can do, right? There's no reason to make a scene, right? Again, there are things that are annoying. Plenty of things I'll say it myself, get annoyed at, but most times I don't say anything. Sometimes I might, right? But I usually don't. I say, okay, there's something I have to work on. At least the person's in synagogue. At least, they're trying whatever. Try and find something good about them, right? That's what Victor Miller would say. Oh, blessed memory. Find one thing that's good about them and harp on it. So you can actually love them. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do. People can be annoying. People for sure can be annoyed, right? So, some things will bother us more, some things will bother us less. But again, it doesn't, just because it's annoying doesn't mean a person has to make a whole scene about it, right? A person doesn't want to socialize. Okay. It doesn't mean a person, has a positive command to socialize when you're there. It can lead to other things, it can lead to other things that aren't so good. Maybe not so good. Okay. Right. But again, at the same time, a lot of people come to synagogue, that's what they're there for. Right. A guy goes to synagogue, he's there 3 times a day. He gets to know people. Yeah, also socialize. But you're basically there to pray or learn. And sometimes things get out of hand, and that's a whole nother topic I'm not getting into now. But there are things that I think can get out of hand, so to speak, and real serious problems, right? But what do you do if people have bad hygiene? Yeah, again, it's one of my personal pet peeves. Most people know it drives me up the wall. But most times I'm not gonna say anything. But I'm trying to learn from Victor Miller, bless the memory, to take it in stride. Try and find something positive to say about the person. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to find something positive. Yeah. I'm not gonna say impossible, but sometimes it can be very hard, very good. Yeah, it can be hard. I don't think I don't think there's any question. I don't think there's any question. But you want to be part of something, you want to be with people, even if a person doesn't want to be so social, but the person has to figure out, something really bothers them, how are you going to do without making a scene? Right. And I got a bigger mouth more than most people. And, sometimes I have to say something. I try and do it in a nice way, whatever, but it's not an easy thing. But, just realize people come to synagogue a lot of times. Why they're there? They're there to socialize. Not just to pray. I mean, praying should be the most important thing, but they're also there to see people. They're also there to socialize, as well. We are social creatures, but okay, it can get out of hand. So it can get out of hand. Especially with people there talking so loud you can't hear the prayers. Yeah, it's a problem. That would be a problem. People are people, right? Right? Synagogues are synagogues. And sometimes a person lives in a small place. I have a handful of people to speak to, and that's also not so good. I'm not saying the person be in a huge place where you get totally lost. But at the same time, the person has to feel that they belong. They feel like, there's some people they can talk to. And, the problem is if a person's in a place, they don't like anybody there. That's a problem. Right? That is a problem. It's not easy to meet people either in some cases. Right? It can also be hard. A person may have to go out of their, comfort zone. But again, as somebody here mentions, it's very true. People are people. 100% people are people. Good. People are definitely people. So, just because, they might be Orthodox or whatever, doesn't mean they always do the right thing. And, something we have to take in stride also. But, if you can, again, what Victor Miller says, if you can find something positive to say about them. Find one positive thing and harp on that. Yeah. I tried it. It's very hard. Very hard with certain people. But, at least the person's there 3 times a day. Whatever else they're doing that annoys you, okay, but at least they're there. That's worth something. That is, you might think, what are they doing? They're only schmoozing. They're only there. Okay, you find something positive. It's very easy to find the negative. I'm very good at that. Right? I think I'm almost an expert. I could probably write books on this. Right? Very easy nitpick. Very, very easy nitpick. Yeah, we can find the good also. You definitely have to find the good. Also, and if you don't find any good or whatever, then yeah, it's a problem. Right? It's a problem. I mean, you go to a place and let's say, a lot of people talking quite loud, and the rabbi has to bang on the lectern because you can't hear the Torah being read. That's a disgrace. I was in a place like that once. That's I'm sure there are other places like that. That's an absolute disgrace. You shouldn't be able to hear a pin drop. Torah's being read, you're sitting there schmoozing? No. When schmooze, go outside. Yeah, there are things, the quorum of the synagogue is a big problem. Well, one of the things they say, why the Spartan people didn't get hit during the Holocaust and by the Enlightenment, because they have utmost respect being in the synagogue. Ashkenazim have a lot to learn from Sephardic. Have a lot to learn from Sephardic people, in that sense. They didn't get hit by the Holocaust for that reason. That's again, that's what many greater people than certainly myself have said. That they have, they respect and decorum in the synagogue, and this is a whole another topic I'm not getting into also, but their decorum is unparalleled, unparalleled. Their decorum in synagogue. Ashkenazim, we have a lot to learn from them, right? No question. Okay, they suffered in other ways, but not from the Holocaust. There's a question about the Holocaust, not about the other things, right? Enlightenment, they didn't suffer from. That they didn't get hit by, right? Could be other things they did, but I was talking about the Holocaust, not other things. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Sunday, back on track here every Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Version Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Version Judaism on YouTube. There I get videos, Q&As, Ethics for Fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, RabbiChaimKaufman@gmail.com, RBBIChaimCoffman@gmail.com. Wish you have a good beginning of the day.